do it.
You have understood, whoa, the riddles of the ages. Yes, and you have understood the universal mind. You have placed your footprints on the everlasting sands of time. Yeah, so tell me why can't you understand that there ain't no such thing as a Superman? There ain't no such thing as a Superman. You was on the Nile, you went to see great Egypt fall. It fell down to the ground. Yes, and you was out there on the corner when being cool went blind. You alone understand that if we're gonna win, we've got to get together, stay together, be together, stick together. So tell me why can't you understand that there ain't no such thing as Superman? There ain't no such thing as a Superman.
Man,
Good
great gift.
Yes,
Good everything. Good everything. You when you pulled that up, you asked a question
I
about
said,
the art.
why the gorilla got to be on the chair though? Why the gorilla?
Why the gorilla on the chair? That's an excellent question. Many people have asked that over the years. The producer wanted to put Gil on the cover. That's from as you saw there.
I'm gonna put it back up.
Yeah, Midnight Band, First Minute of a New Day. He wanted to put Gil on the cover. Gil didn't like his picture being taken, at least the way he used to tell the story. And then Gil said, well, we'll put a gorilla on the thing. Now, everybody watching in Nubia and YouTube around the world, where have we seen that wicker chair? That's representative of the chair Huey Newton was sitting in. So Gil said, put a gorilla there. Why? Because this is the time of guerrilla warfare. We talking about being in the streets. And so instead of Huey Newton, he puts the gorilla in the chair. And then he said, many years later, they asked him, because everybody asked, why are you putting these gorillas, man? Why these gorillas? He said, a gorilla is a very peaceful animal. They're only hostile when attacked. But when attacked, they're extremely hostile. That's where we're coming from. So in other words, he's sitting on the chilling. He ain't gonna bother you if you don't bother him. So, this is a message to ISIS. I'm sorry. I think they call them ICE. Y'all better stop running up on people in the street, because it ain't gonna be those of us trying to, let's think about this, let's plan, let's build. Let's go put them Negroes in. I wasn't bothering nobody. Now I seen you snatch this 6-year-old out of first grade, and all of a sudden, there is no ICE because I snatched the mask off first, and then we took your head with it. In other words, this is the gorilla. So that's why he was using gorilla on me.
I had a conversation yesterday on Foolishness Friday about bringing watermelon into a movie theater, and that sparked people holding off for 3 hours to talk about watermelon.
Wow.
And we know that watermelon is triggering for a lot of people. A lot of Black people will not eat watermelon in public because of the tropes around Black people eating watermelon, and it's triggering seeing a gorilla. The Angel Reese picture that Robert Griffin III posted from a page that had like 100 views, and brought light to her, her Madden cover with a picture of a gorilla or a monkey with her uniform on to bring light to something and played himself. It's triggering.
Is that what he did? Is that the thing he did where the unprovoked brother decided that he would then say, keep her name out your mouth? I'm talking about Shaq.
Not
Yeah.
just Shaq. My brother
No, I mean,
Martin.
but I'm thinking Shaq in particular because I'm thinking about that picture on the
Yeah,
cover of that album. Hey man, I don't bother nobody. Now y'all know if I get with this, nobody gonna be able to get in my way. Robert Griffin, yeah, bro, you messed with the metaphorical gorilla in the wicker chair. Shaq don't bother nobody. But now it's like, really, this is what we doing? Let's do it. Has Robert clapped back yet?
I suspect he will not.
I don't. I don't think he will either. Yeah. So I'm sorry. So I didn't see. I never saw the what prompted the rage. It was literally a picture of. Okay, Robert, you should go home and have your wife pour you a nice glass of hot tea, and you sit there and let her talk to you as to why, since you clearly think you can. You know.
Well, some believe it's the reason why he did that. It's being egged on by Missy Ann. But I
Oh
bring
yeah.
that up to say, yesterday I said we should over-index in eating watermelon in public because watermelon is so good. It is so good for us. It was a source of income and empowerment for so many Black people, and they completely demonized it to the point that Black people won't even eat around a watermelon out in public because of the depiction of it and the jokes and the cartoons and the commercials and all that. And I feel like when you just said that about the gorilla in the chair, they always depict, try to make us look like monkeys. But if you shave a monkey, the skin is white, the lips are thin, they're nothing like Black people. So, but I also think when you just said that, I said, maybe we should embrace the trope. Thank you, Gil Scott Heron, and find out what it means,
Yeah.
you know, because we
I
all
mean,
root for Caesar in the Planet of the Apes. Just
well,
saying. Rooting for
that
Caesar.
is so interesting. It's I was showing the students uh on was it Tuesday? No, Tuesday I was in Philly. Wednesday we had it was the last day that I taught this week for summer school, and we have all the women and men's first year athletes, so the volleyball players, basketball players, football players, and I was showing them a clip of a conversation between the artist Kerry James Marshall and the good brother Bill Rhoden, the columnist. And Bill Rhoden, they're friends, and Rhoden was comparing sports competition to competition in art. And he said, "Is it the same in the art world? You got to fight to get up in these museums, and and I cover the blood sports, basketball, football, where it's clearly and that's where our people are." And in the conversation, as conversation unfolded, it's very interesting to see all these 18, 17, 18, 19-year-old young people. Not all Black. There's a few white dudes playing football. Howard came in and they're in the class. And as we were talking, it's amazing the things that they just don't know. And so as we were having this conversation and things began unfolding, they were like, "Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. This competition is very intense." And as you're talking, it reminded me of at a key moment we were talking about the metaphors and the idea of being called animals. Even as we see Trump trying to put the cap on name, image, and likeness. Now, so we talking about that a little bit. Um, when you realize that somebody been playing you, it could be very disturbing. It could be very disturbing. And you just made me think about that in the moment. Oh, by the way, the person who wanted to put Gil's face on the cover because he wanted to capitalize on this is 1974 was a brother. Not a brother, or what's his name? He was big in a lot of careers. Probably most people know him from Whitney Houston. Oh yeah, Clive Davis. Yeah,
God, Davis.
Clive Davis wanted to make Gil Scott Heron, and no, this is not about me, man. Gil Scott Heron refused to let Clive Davis. You're not gonna put that on me. I'm part of something else. Now we're gonna make this money, fine. But what we're not gonna do is elevate. Because didn't you just hear this song? Ain't no such thing as a Superman. I see what you want to do. You see us as command, no problem. But
I know you're going to go in a different direction today, but even as you say that, I have a visceral reaction when people try to push, especially me, into a leadership. And I'm like, no, we are all responsible, and I'm not being humble. I'm saying that that's how they get you,
that's how
and
they
then I go, like, who's the leader of the Hispanics? Who's the leader of the Asians? Who's the Jewish leader? Like we, we don't know them, right? Who,
right.
you know, but they pick our leaders because they recognize that, a wayward people need somebody to, either hang on the cross or to follow them. I'm gonna say less about that. But I do think that's fascinating.
That's where we going. Because
Okay.
after all, Jesus Christ, who came from Krypton to save us, is but yeah, it's all Christian metaphor. It's
Ah,
all Christian metaphor. It's why James Gunn sticking a finger in the eye of everybody with this new Superman is hilarious to me. I went to see it Sunday morning. I said, well, I'm gonna go to church. I might as well go to church to see the real Jesus Christ of America, Superman. And
I
so let me go into church
I'll
and
let you
see Jesus. People gonna be hot. Don't be hot. John Clark, you said, don't get mad, get smart. This is their man. James Gunn has committed heresy. That's why they mad at him. I'm like, look at this. This is beautiful. It's beautiful. In fact, remember what was the one? It may have been Superman Returns. There was one where he had been defeated in a battle, and the people lifted him up, and like he was almost like he was body surfing. They were passing him, and he was sprayed out like it was the crucifix scene. And if you understand Superman as Jesus, which is absolutely who he is, ironically, two Jewish 20-somethings created him in 1938. In part, again, that masking move, because when you commingle white nationalist Jesus with the United States of America, you get Superman. Every movie they've made has been kind of refracted engagement with that metaphor. This is the indestructible guy who is here to save us, and his parents sent him here to show us that we too can achieve. I'm sorry, it's too heavy for two people. But then again, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
and the sun will heal you. The sun. The sun will heal
Yeah,
you. Yes.
no question. It's right. It's not even complicated. In fact, all you got to do, anybody who reads the Superman comics, anybody in them comics heads, it's not even, all superhero movies and most are religious allegory in one way or the other, if you really think about it. Or at least meditations on either the permanence or the impermanence of the human condition. Because when you think about his greatest frenemy, it ain't Lex Luthor, it ain't Bizarro, it's Batman. Because Batman represents the non-existence of the divine in that sense. Ain't nobody coming to save you. And I don't know what y'all talking about, these morals and stuff. Batman got a plan to kill every one of his friends, including Superman. He's like, every time it comes down to it, what is Superman? Or Batman, I got a plan for that. Why? I got a piece of kryptonite at the crib that, I got a plan for every one of y'all. Ain't nobody coming to save. So when Gil enters this conversation, when he says ain't no such thing as Superman, he's reminding us. He even takes the things that we want to elevate as sacred. Because remember, the Panthers, there was this whole, and I think a lot of it is contrived. Although if you talk to ex-Panthers, members of us, they will tell you we shared a great deal in terms of our ideology, but there were things we disagreed on. And what academics who don't have a dog in the fight, because they wouldn't bust a grape in a fruit salad, will write about the difference between the revolutionary nationalists and the cultural nationalists. Go to hell. But there is something there in terms of this idea that y'all want to go back in the past and take these societies and elevate them like we were perfect at some time. We were never been perfect. But when Gil says in that line, you was on the Nile, you went to see great Egypt fall. In other words, Egypt is an incredible place. We're going to talk about that when we're in Kemet. I'll talk about it all the time. If we had been here, if we physically had been during the period of Ramses or Hatshepsut, we'd have been working on them bricks. Please be clear. These great achievements come at a great cost. And pharaonic society, Ayukwe says this all the time, you got to be critical of those hierarchical societies. But then he goes on and says, and you was out there on the corner when being cool went blind. In other words, you've seen it all. Stop following these people who claim to have some, the founding fathers and Plato and Aristotle and the Greek. Man, go to hell. I was on the Nile. I went there because I'm like, this right here, it's unsustainable. And I was out there yesterday on the way to this building where you talking about the founding fathers. This dude right here is strung out on smack. He can't get a job. Yeah, there's nothing white people can show us that we have not seen before. You know what I'm saying? So Superman, ain't no such thing. Now let's go watch the movie and have a good time. But y'all want to believe in Superman. And that crazy man y'all got down there living in our public housing, lets out a damn meme with himself looking up like he's Superman.
Well, they sued him. They was like,
Yeah,
yeah, nah, no, son.
I'm loving him. We were talking about before we went live. I'm acquiring a kind of a, I wouldn't call it affection because I'm not insane, but there's a kind of enjoyment I'm getting from Donald Trump because he's not an outlier. He is the living embodiment of white nationalism. He is the American dream. And when Trump, I'm loving the fact that people who want to believe in something that doesn't exist, you know, you cancel Stephen Colbert's show because he got the nerve to say something. And y'all trying to get what is that?
That's a little deeper. Roy Wood was on yesterday. Roy Wood Jr.
Yeah,
Fascinating.
what did Roy say?
Well, that it was coming. You know, the money that they put out doesn't matter. Like Steve Colbert makes like $15 million a year. They're $20 million in the hole. Even if he worked for free, they wouldn't be able to. Like it was absolutely a financial decision. They had canceled the show that comes after him, coupled with them bending the knee, coupled with, you know, that didn't help. But you know, it's a lot more. You know, as you're talking, I'm saying the hypocrisy is right in our faces, and it's wild now. The backlash over the Epstein files, which I'm not sure if it's performative or what. Like, if this is the thing that y'all upset about, we knew all along. You got an 80-year-old man who has a catheter, a diaper. He's got, you know, probably deep vein thrombosis and high blood pressure, but you celebrate him like he is a hero. He is a decrepit. His mind is melted, and that's your hero, and that's the hill you're willing to die. It's none of it makes any sense. This is insane.
But it does. Catholics, I think this is where we have a challenge getting our minds around this. Because there's no, it's almost like, it's like when we have conversations with students around intersectionality. I don't use intersectionality as a trope because its artificiality can block what we're seeing. In other words, to have intersections, you got to chop it up into sections in the first place and understand the intellectual value of it. Well, let me not go around the barn. Let me just say what I'm saying straight away. It might not make financial sense, but there are other factors that commingle. Like, what else does Paramount own? Does BET make money? So in other words, what I'm saying is, what is the purpose? What are you doing? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, and you go from Letterman to Colbert, and it's like, we're in a climate where we've bent the knee. So now it's convenient to say, oh, you care about money now. Really? The Discovery Channel make money? Nick Jr. or the kids watching Nick Jr. like they used to be? MTV, VH1. What has streaming done to MTV? Y'all about to cancel VH1 and MTV? I see y'all went after Queen Latifah. Okay, you got her up out the paint, but who else? All right, so this is about money. No problem. Here's the list of, oh, wait a minute. Oh, so, okay. In other words, I'm cool with it, and I ain't got no problem with it. Colbert don't, you know, I watch his clips. I can't remember last time I watched the Stephen Colbert thing straight, or the 200 people who work for him. You know, John Batiste, and then it's interesting to see the responses. Right? People like, yeah, some people mad, other people like, well, you know, what did the guy? What's the young guy used to be on Saturday Night Live that has the Seth Meyers? Seth Meyers is like, oh, I didn't like it, but now he doesn't have the excuse that he can't hang out with me at night. And it's like, yeah, you trying to save your show. And guess what, Seth? You giggle a little too much. Stephen Colbert was a little too even-tempered. But, you know, plus in the Christian metaphor, let's be very crystal clear about it. This man a practicing Catholic from South Carolina. Let's just let's peel back a whole lot of layers and have this conversation, because in some ways his Christianity is closer to that of, I don't know, James Earl Carter than you Christian fascist nationalists who are not Christians at all. Stephen Colbert got to get out the moves we trying to make. We can't afford. Yeah, you're right. Roy is right. You can't afford to have him continuing on this, because at this moment, the lie you getting ready to try to promote now, forget the merger. You know, forget all that. It just becomes, I think it's very interesting at this moment. But I mean, I was just saying that on the way to the larger point. What we are facing at this moment is a beautiful thing. I think it's a beautiful thing in the sense that Trumpism, and, you know, those of you who watch us, you know, hate watch or whatever, you should tell your boy, junior varsity, just slow your roll. You'll get there. They put you there to get there. No need for you to jump out and tell them, show the letter. Hey man, just calm down. He's going, okay? We know you were the plan all along. You just relax. But what I was about to say is though that the reason I'm enjoying it is not because there's going to be pain, because there's going to be pain and that's not enjoyable. People are going to suffer. But this isn't Paramount. This isn't CBS and ABC. Now you want to sue the Wall Street Journal? Notice ain't nobody say nothing yesterday. While you were on the air, we were on the air, they went quiet. Why? Because see, Murdoch is not going to settle with you, my friend. In fact, Murdoch might go back in the back room and unlock that door and show you something else. So Murdoch is like, yeah, I'm not bowing the knee. But hey, man, y'all better go get this crazy boy. He act like he don't know who we are. This ain't CBS, my friend. You know what I'm saying? This ain't ABC, buddy. This ain't the two law firms that bent the knee. I'm Rupert Murdoch. We put you in that pit. Guess what? Sue us. We'll see you in court. They went dark yesterday. They got to get Trump in line. And if anybody think them transcripts, ain't nothing in them transcripts. Nothing. Nothing you ain't already seen. Y'all got the lady, y'all got the wrangler in jail. All you got to do is say, who do I talk to? And it's over. But y'all, I'm loving it. I'm loving it because Trump is who they want their followers to believe they are.
But the followers are now, Nick Fuentes, Alex Joe. I mean, I was like, what? I'm so confused by this outrage over the Epstein files that everybody knew he was friends with. Everybody knew he was on the island. Everybody knew he grabbed people. He said it out his mouth. He's an adjudicated secretary. What is? No one can explain to me why now.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. Yes, they can. And think about it. It's real. You already know what it is. You know what it is, King. There's a scene in the Snyderverse version of Superman. You saw that. You saw Zack Snyder's Superman. It was Superman versus Batman, and then Justice League. The three films, right? Snyderverse.
I think I've seen them all.
At the moment,
very dark.
Yeah. Snyder's thing was dark. As far as I'm concerned, they're my favorite ones. I mean, I love those because remember when he starts with who was the poet that they everybody knows that the dice is loaded, but you got to see the Snyder cut for that. He starts in a very dark place. There's a depression. The dog is looking depressed, sitting next to the guy begging for money. Leonard Cohen. Leonard Cohen had an album. Leonard Cohen. Everybody knows. That's it. In other words, everybody knows that the dice are loaded. Everybody knows that the game is rigged. So at the moment when they lose faith in Superman, remember they had a statue of him and everything. Somebody spray paints false God over the Superman's chest. This is what we're watching right now. This is their Jesus. At this moment, the vitriol is because we believed that Hillary Clinton was eating babies at Comet Pizza over here on Connecticut Avenue. We went in there looking for it. And now what? So release the list. No list. Now, the influencers that Trump called in the middle of this week to tell to shut up, some of them kind of have toned it down, but Fuentes and them, their whole shtick is based on these believers. These are the televangelists. They don't have another play. You know what I'm saying? But the true believers, them hillbillies who now are living in flyover states that ain't gonna have no national public radio to give them local news. They act like everything on national public radio is broadcast from down here near Union Station. No. When you lose NPR, you lose your local news, friend. Your Jesus is out here touching little girls. And you now false God. The ultimate betrayal is when your God betrays you. At that point, they was mad at Superman in the Snyderverse because this is the betrayal. And I'm not gonna give anything away from the Superman movie, but let's be very clear. There are acts of betrayal in James Gunn's version, the new Superman movie, that I absolutely enjoyed because Gunn brings the same irreverent satire that Stephen Colbert has, ironically, that he had in Guardians of the Galaxy over to the new Superman movie. So not only is it not dark, he taking some of them same things y'all was obsessing over and is poking so much fun at them that I'm laughing out loud. First of all, you got a whole ass dog in the middle of the movie going, oh, I'm like, this dude right here is giving y'all the middle finger and I'm so here for it. But anyway, my point is that the moment you read, you realize that everybody knows that the dice is loaded. Everybody knows that the game is rigged. Everybody knows. Hey, Mike Pence. Nah, forget Mike Pence. We going after Donald Trump. It's beautiful. I love it. You gotta love it, Prof. You gotta love it.
I'm struggling with loving it. I'm struggling with loving it just because a cornered dog is his most dangerous, and a lot of people gonna get bit. And so
sure.
I agree. It's probably gonna end the way it should. The road to ending that way, I was like, the last days of the Holocaust were the most brutal. The most people died, and they were killing people by the thousands in the last days. And they knew they lost. It was over. So I just remember, since we're having a momentum of memory, know that the days are going to get much darker, and I just don't feel people are prepared for that on the way to, the light, so to speak. And I just want people to be prepared and be sober and, be mindful and intentional and not take these times as frivolous, because things always turn out well until they don't,
Until they don't. And that maybe that's the most sobering moment of all. Nobody's coming. I mean, nobody's coming.
And Jill said it in this. We got to come together. We got to come together. We got to come together. Yes.
The day you understand, there ain't no such thing as Superman. But here's the problem, and this is where it gets a little touchy in terms of movement and memory. When we talk about Africana spirituality in our spiritual movements, this is why, and for everyone who has met a lot of people this week who are new to this conversation, very deeply grateful for everyone. We know that during COVID, when we started this journey together in this formation, tens and sometimes hundreds of thousands of people would be here with us on weekends, and there was no narrative, there was no newbie. Now that there is, and now that we continue, here we are in our 280th consecutive weekly conversation. The world has opened up and is clawing for everyone's attention again, and yet we remain, to the degree that we continue to aspire to and commit to this, as reliable as the sunrise. And it really does mean a great deal to all of us. And so for the folks who are new to this space, welcome. And it's always beautiful to see that. And in a moment, I'll talk about my comrade, colleague, my sister, Nina Gilbert, down in Morehouse. You all remember, I think it was session 263. We were in Atlanta. It just come from the education conference that she does down there, the Morehouse Center for Excellence in Education. And that's why I awarded our shirt again. Morehouse Educators Change Lives. Nina, we had her on the mic now yesterday on Friday the 18th of July. She was in Philadelphia, the Alpha Conference. She was on a panel talking about education. And in the conversation, she said that she's designing a new class. And I said I was going to talk about this in a minute, but I might as well put this marker down and I'll come back to it in a few minutes. She's designing a class in the fall for her students. And, if you're in the Atlanta University Center, you can take classes at any of the schools. So I imagine there'll be some young sisters from Spelman, and there'll be some sisters and brothers from Clark Atlanta as well, maybe a couple from Morris Brown College, hopefully. In addition to the Morehouse, the men of Morehouse. When they graduate, they become Morehouse men, and she reminded us all yesterday. But she said the course is designed in part around narrative. So one of the things she's done, she raises money, she gets out there, she's partnered with the owners of the Gathering Spot. They have a spot here in DC, one in Atlanta, and we were there at their headquarters in Atlanta where the center is housed. But some of that money that Dr. Gilbert raises, that Nina raises, has gone to subscriptions to narrative. And so the Nubia classes, and in particular what we're doing here, are part of the course. So I just wanted to mention that and pass, and I'll come back to it in a minute, because again, ain't no such thing as Superman. We're saving ourselves. We have to. The day we understand no such thing as Superman, ain't nobody coming. We have to understand that. And so, and I'm teaching a class. Actually, this will be the first time that I've offered it, 25 years at Howard. And part of it is because I usually teach the same rotation of classes and students who've taken all the classes that we have in our department that I teach. Well, no, that's Carr, when you gonna teach something else? We'll tell you. So in the fall, I'm teaching a class called The Black University. And we're going to talk about HBCUs, the concept of the university. We're going to do a real deep dive. And that class, I'm going to offer a broader version of it in Nubia, and still trying to figure out where else it would be effective to position it with Nubia at the center. So I'm very excited about that. And when Nina announced to the world yesterday, because I didn't know that's what she was planning until she came on Urban View yesterday morning and announced it. I was like, man, I'm so excited. So after it, so what do you mean? We got to figure this out. It's going to be great. Anyway, I'm saying all that to say that we are the ones who will save ourselves. Superman's not coming from Krypton, but here's where it gets a little touchy. There are those, in terms of ways of knowing, who would say nobody's coming. And do with that what you will. Nobody's coming, alhamdulillah. Nobody's coming in the name of Jesus. Nobody's coming. And anything you need is already here. And I think about that in terms of Africana ways of knowing, because when we think about Ifa, we think about Karamble or Santeria, when we think about Vodun, when we think about just all the various ways of knowing that we brought, as Del Rolando said, in Centers from home, we were very clear about nobody's coming. And so even when we go to Egypt and we go to see the Saku, the physical remains of those who were buried, the women and men who served as pharaohs 5,000 years ago, between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago, when we go into these temples and pyramids, people say, well, the Egyptians were obsessed with death. No, everybody dies. Everybody dies. That's a favorite word of another comic book character that everybody's familiar with, who's got another movie coming out the end of this month, next week, I guess. That would be Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. They're going to keep trying to make Fantastic Four until they figure they can make some money. Fantastic Four. They even got a nice little, funny, everything about the music. But my point is, Reed Richards, T'Challa, the Black Panther, when they were all in this formation of superheroes that looked at the world very clear-eyed, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, Black Bolt, Namor, the Submariner, Black Panther and Reed Richards, they formed a crew to handle all the cosmic problems that the rest of the heroes and the rest of the species just had to look away. They couldn't stand it. They called themselves the Illuminati. And one of the things they often say, which is why I don't know how they're going to figure this out with Jonathan Majors and Kang the Conqueror, and how they're going to replay it. And, now Robert Downey Jr. is going to be Dr. Doom. But in Marvel, that whole thing, the whole multiverse and the colliding multiverses and Battle World and all that, comes down to this thing, this essential thing. Everything ends. Everything ends. And you can't escape the ending. Does something come after? We don't know. Does something continue? Absolutely. Does it continue in a form that we would recognize? We don't know. All of that uncertainty animated by the simple fact that everything ends and everything begins. That metaphor is a thread, but guess what? Nobody's coming. And if you are a practitioner in African spiritual systems, you understand that spirituality lives in your physical form and transcends your physical form. And you don't worry about that. What you worry about, as they would say in the Odu Ifa, among the Yoruba people, they would say, everybody's on earth to work on their character. This is the thing. And a lot of what we deal with is the question of character. Iwa, as the Yoruba would say, the question of right behavior, ma'a, as the Egyptians would say. The question of representing what you have learned and projecting it forward in the world to do good, or home training, as they might say in the idiom of ebonics. The idea that we don't need, not only do we not need a Superman, we don't want a Superman of any stripe, of any variety. So I'll come back to all those things in a minute. Because right now we are in a moment that, in terms of our Africana studies framework, social structure, governance structure, ways of knowing, science and technology, cultural meaning making, and movement and memory, the 6 categories which, when we ask questions derived from them, project us in forward in terms of an Africana framing. That is what Africana studies is. It's a discipline framing. It's a consideration of reality through lenses drawn from the long experiences of African people. That's what distinguishes it. It isn't just talking about Black stuff. Saw a footnote, the good brother Timothy Wilbeck is offering a course on Kendrick Lamar at Temple University in the fall. And some of my students asked me, Dr. Carr, you think we could get a Kendrick class here? I said, I'm sure we could. I won't be teaching it. So you don't like Kendrick? It's not a matter of like or dislike. I wouldn't teach a class on Gil Scott-Heron. I said, all those forms of cultural meaning making can be brought into our structure of Africana and dealt with, but that's spectacle. I'm not saying it's not useful. I'm not saying it's not interesting, but I am saying that that's not Africana studies. That's the way I define it. And God bless you. Let 1,000 flowers bloom. Do what you do. But I'm staying focused. So in those 6 categories, that Africana studies framework that allows us to study any and everything, it requires us to do that. That first category, social structure, we're at a moment now in time and space where we are being pulled into conversation that are overrepresented by social structure questions. Is there evidence? Are they destroying the evidence? Epstein and Trump, all these photographs. So what happens next? Where are the people who were actually assaulted? They're coming out to speak. Hey, what happened to the Wrangler? You know, she's in jail, right? Hey, all those are social structure questions. Necessary questions, but do not allow them to overpower all the other categories if we're talking about Africana. You don't have to be of immediate African descent to use the Africana studies framework. It allows us to level set in a way that keeps us clear-eyed. Remember, there ain't no such thing as Superman. So when Gil Scott-Heron plays, and one other thing before I continue that we go straight through, I want to thank everybody who knew, who showed up over the arc of the past week to sample and be in conversation around what it appears that Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson is doing with her dissents and with her writing on the Supreme Court today, U.S. Supreme Court. If you are new to the space, continue to come, hit that like button if you're on the YouTube side. Continue to subscribe to Knarrative, join Nubia. We'll be together on Monday night. As the Muslims say, human beings plan and Allah plans, and Allah is the greatest of planners. Same thing the Christians say in a variation. And so the lightning bolts knocked out the power Monday night. So there's only rare occasions where I won't be in office hours. But of course, because this is Knarrative and because it's Nubia on the Knarrative Nubia side and that formation, they had something for us. So the Nubian refill was able to continue this. So we'll be back, inshallah. We'll be back, God willing. We'll be back, we willing. We being manifestations of the divine Monday, and we'll continue to have the conversation. I was looking forward to that because that Ketanji Brown Jackson conversation we had last week, I think, has resonated. And so we want to continue. So hit that like button if you're on the YouTube side. Subscribe, so you'll get the notifications and share for folks and continue to subscribe to Knarrative to Nubia. I'm so fired up now. We get out of here. I'm going to, continue to work on this Black University class that I'm planning for the fall. And now that I know that Nina is doing this thing in Morehouse, I'm gonna say less right now. We'll make that step because the rent is too damn high, the tuition is too high at all these places, and me and Nina are of the same mind on a whole lot of stuff. That being one, so we can ready to jailbreak a whole bunch more stuff. So yeah, as I said, Gil Scott-Heron in that song, he's reminding us at a period in the early 70s when there's a lot of uncertainty, but there's also a lot of hope. And the reminders are there. This is the period of Marvin Gaye. I was talking about that with my students last week, my afternoon students, the Carr STEM scholars and the social science and humanities scholars. These are scholarship students who are working in a different way at the university, at Howard University. The morning students, the student athletes, are employees of the university as well, but they are working on the fields and the courts and the gymnasiums and on the fields of athletic competition as their primary way for paying over $70,000 a year worth of tuition. It's ridiculous, and nobody should be paying that anywhere, not just Howard. And the afternoon students, of course, they have earned their keep in terms of paying that tuition, primarily in the classroom. All of them are in the classroom. They've got different emphases in terms of what they are being able to maintain, get their scholarships for. And we were having that conversation on Monday afternoon, talking about Gil Scott-Heron and Kendrick and all these other folks. And, at a moment in history in the 1970s, when you have Marvin Gaye moving beyond what he had been normally doing in Morehouse to ask what's going on, and Sly Stone in the rejoinder almost like there's a riot going on. Gil Scott-Heron is there as well. And Gil Scott-Heron is saying the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be live streamed, to use today's parlance. The revolution will not be artificial intelligence. The revolution will not be a lot of things that we think it will be, but we don't get distracted. And so Gil is making the point that we transcend any particular moment in time and space, any particular social structure moment. And it is who we are to each other, that governance formation that determines what we are doing. And our long memory, the momentum of memory, that idea of the movement and memory, how did African people remember these experiences, is what allows us not only to sustain ourselves, but to posit solutions drawn from our long memory. That should allow us a serenity of sorts, not lose our sense of urgency. We got to do some things. As Joe Madison would say, what are you going to do about it? But there is a serenity that allows us to know that we can and will do them if we will remember how we problem solved the last times around and apply those lessons to the unique circumstances we find ourselves in today. It was Sheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese scholar, who said, the African Senegalese scholar, who said, no one would have looked on with more shock than the ancient Egyptians if they were to come forward today and see these people who came from outside of Africa apparently ruling over everything. By the way, footnote, good to see that France removed its last military bases from Senegal this week. So it was interesting reading that, because they were saying, well, for the first time in 60-some years, France will not have this military presence in Senegal. And I'm reading this like, boy, this is a social structure newspaper. The French been meddling in West Africa for centuries. Oh, you mean since the name Senegal appeared on a map as an independent country? What about them lines that got drawn before? Anyway, my point is that Sheikh Anta Diop is from what is called Senegal, this Wolof man. And he said, nobody would have looked on with more horror at the idea that these people would be apparently ruling over stuff than the ancient Egyptians. He said, because they couldn't imagine a time when they did not have control of everything they surveyed. He said, so understand. Oh, well, actually, and then he goes on to say, and they would never have imagined that condition could have been reversed. He says, but understanding that things change, and that at any given moment you might be on the top or the bottom, to give you the serenity, this is Sheikh Anta Diop, the serenity to accept the facts as they are. The facts are that there is some suffering in the land right now. There's mass murder being committed in what we call the so-called Middle East, Gaza Strip. There's mass murder being fomented in the Sudan. It's reading, even about the Darfur region again, mass murder, children being killed, people, everybody being killed. There's mass murder in Congo, as Paul Kagame continues to try to figure out how to get in bed with the United States government on the razor's edge. There's mass murder going on in Haiti, as the UN just voted again this week to extend the so-called peacekeeping force. There is murder going on in Kenya as they are in the streets. There's murder all over the world. Some of it's so open, the slaughter. In fact, today's Financial Times, no, it wasn't Financial Times, I think it was the New York Times today that made the observation that, I'm in Philly every Tuesday this month with my Freedom School students. And so it's interesting to see that right up the road in Philadelphia, actually it is Philadelphia, just up Broad Street, There's a little neighborhood called Cheltenham. Those who know, or Cheltenham, as they would call it. And let me see if I can find it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. No, I wasn't able to find it. Well, anyway, Bibi Netanyahu, who went to school in Tel Aviv, no, actually, no, Philadelphia. Cheltenham High School is having a debate now. They don't want Netanyahu's picture to be in the Hall of Fame in Cheltenham. Maybe it was the Financial Times. I'll look at that. They don't want it in Cheltenham High School. Very interesting. By the way, Penn had their reunion for the class. I think it was a 2020, and they're all talking about Luigi, who went to Penn. That was in the Financial. That certainly was in the Financial Times. But there's a lot going on. But the idea that the situation, the conditions, the violences, what's going on in state formations and private violence, that can't be reversed, Sheikh Al-Joke will remind you that it can always be reversed. You have to have the serenity to accept the facts as they are, because there were always times when these conditions didn't exist. And when we face certain conditions like this, we have the capacity to change them. So it's important for us to understand this. Now, for the white nationalists in the United States of America, listen, shrink the globe down to the U.S., where we'll spend most of the time today. This is a holy war. It's a holy war. I'm not talking about a Christian war. Stephen Colbert is a Christian. He's a good Catholic. And he's not involved in it like that. You know, Russell Vogt and Kevin Roberts, they religious crusaders, like P. Hexeth. It's not concealed. They're fighting for their way of life. So Russell Vogt, who is riding high right now, oh, but that condition, my little friend, is going to be reversed. It's going to be reversed. Because some of those very same people who voted for Bozo, your friend, to put you in a position with a knife in your hand to come out here and try to cut the entrails out of the state formations, as you're doing with NPR, as your supplicant people in the federal legislature, led by another religious zealot named MAGA Mike Johnson, the MAGA Muppet in Louisiana, has now just laid prostrate before this train, because he's a true believer as well. The evisceration of the Department of Education and all of that. You know, Lurie has been doing a particularly good job of going through the implications of that and inviting people into the conversation on serious during her time there, time slide. All of those people, the people you are literally selling out, well, I won't call it selling out, because you never had any intention to work with them anyway. You tried to dupe them. Oh, but they're getting ready to spray paint false God on your Jesus's chest. At any rate, in fact, they're already doing it, and no amount of influences are going to stop them. They're fighting for their way of life, Sammy the Bull Alito. And I mentioned last week, and I spoke too hastily. I shouldn't have said the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's where they want to put Emile Beauvais on. They want to put him on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. I thought about it when I walked past the Third Circuit Court of Appeals on Market Street in Philadelphia on Tuesday, on my way down to go to a bookstore. And so, yeah, that's where Sammy Alito was, and that's where they want to put Emile Beauvais, rather. The Third Circuit is in Philadelphia. Well, you know, he too, religious zealot, like Russell Vogt, little small-minded religious extremist zealot. And they don't play by the same rules. They're all moving in the same direction. Trump is their Superman. And so, you know, Superman exists because people need him to. He exists because people need him to. You know, I loved what our brother Mike Harriet wrote this week in Contraband Camp, where he calls it American derangement syndrome. I say anything that conflicts with white supremacy faith cannot be real. Like the Epstein list or whatever. Trump is their Superman. And not only that, in many ways, he's their God. I've told y'all many times, and I won't labor it now. You can go into the archive and look it up. That time I went down to the National Archive and gave that talk, Abraham Lincoln, American Jesus, where I said, you know, if George Washington is God, the Father, then Abraham Lincoln is Jesus, because he gave his life so that you continue. And then in that trilogy, if you're talking about an aspirational America, that might make Martin Luther King Jr. the Holy Ghost, standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, channeling Jesus, except a very different Jesus, which is probably why they wouldn't greenlight my brother Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Superman. See, Superman can't be anything other than who he is, even when he is being benevolent. It's a benevolent God, which is why the betrayal makes the betrayal every much more bad. And of course, he's the ultimate immigrant. We'll come to that as in a moment. Because people have always been trained in the Western society and those who pick up those bad habits to look at immigrants as those who must be eliminated. And unfortunately, we're seeing that even on the continent of Africa. I was reading something this week in South Africa, Operation Dudula, which is Isisulu for expel. They want people to be put out of South Africa, and they're saying they're draining the healthcare resources. What that? Okay. Yes, absolutely. They're draining the healthcare, they're draining the resources. There we go. Uh-oh. Be back? I
Go
didn't
ahead.
know.
I'm here. I
Okay, cool.
apologize. I should
No,
not
no, no.
distraction.
Back in. Come on.
My fault. Let me just block this person. Sorry. Go ahead.
Am I being blocked? Okay. No, like, oh no, everybody behave. Come on, y'all. We got look, this is it's funny because every once in a while, it's not that I'm hungry, but I could always eat a little bit. So some of these descendants of slavery folks try to come for me a little bit on social media today. And I had 15, 20 minutes. So I danced with them a little while. And I don't want to name check anybody. Actually, I really don't care. But there's a couple of folks, who out of South Carolina who have this thing in their head that our people loved America, and during captivity and after, it was their love for America that animated their actions. And I simply asked them to give me some sources because that's absolutely untrue, at least as far as I have seen. So when you start talking about the land speculators, the Ed Philbricks and others who came from Boston and New York to literally take the land out from under the feet of the Africans in South Carolina, what they wanted was to be left alone. And what their parents wanted to do was to go home. When you look at Kasula, Alue, out of what they call Africa Town and now Mobile, Alabama. In fact, one of the young brothers who was a first-year student at Howard in the afternoon class is from Mobile. And when I mentioned Kazula, as they call him, and we read, of course, Barracoon here in Nubia, he said, "Oh, I know all about that." I said, "Well, tell the rest of them." And he walked chapter and verse through the whole thing. I said, "It's true. Y'all still got 2 proms, 2 Mardi Gras?" Yeah, got 2 Mardi Gras for sure. That boy 18 years old. It ain't going nowhere. So I just wanted the young brother from South Carolina, not so young. He keeps running for Congress. That's Jim Clyburn. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but one day, man, walk me through. And they just getting mad. Here come the rest of them. Some bots, and bots make their appearance in the Superman movie too, in the form of monkeys typing on keyboards, keeping people as agents of chaos. I love the metaphors. Gunn does a great job with metaphors. I'm not quite sure if the Lex Luthor in this is Elon Musk or Donald Trump. I would say more Musk than Trump. But anyway, the metaphors are consistent all the way through. But, we were talking about the fact that these African people wanted to go home. And then their descendants, who are also your ancestors, want to be left alone. So you, because you see some aspiration in loving your master, and wrapping yourself in your master's flag and claiming it as your flag with no real discernment about what that represents. You want to somehow create this illusion that they did that for patriotism. It is patently absurd. Come on in Monday night if y'all are in. Let's talk about it. We could talk about it. Probably some people in the Mbongi right now talking about it in a minute as we kind of begin to wind up. I'll look around and look over in the Mbongis, which is what I refer to instead of saying chat. Mbongi is Kikongo word meaning a house where privacy has no room. What you think belongs to you. What you say belongs to us. So as people are typing, maybe some of this will spark some conversation in the Mbongi. But thinking about this is very important. Gil Scott-Heron's critique of savior mythology and passive hope has to be considered. It is a governance formation that he is evoking. He's invoking that as a very important moment. This obsession the United States of America has with superheroes and the decline of superhero genres is symbolic of fatigue. It's empire fatigue. It's global structure fatigue. Understand, there's a need for saviors. And it intensifies during moments of national decline. Understand that. Superman emerges in the late 30s as Hitler is getting ready to roll into Western Europe. 1938, Action Comics. 39, this is a riff on it. Actually, I don't have a copy of Action Comics where he first appears, but I do have, when they did reprints and things like that. I got a couple of them. In fact, in the back room back there, I keep some of the comics here, most of them in storage, but there's one oversized comic I bought when I was a kid. Y'all probably remember Superman versus Muhammad Ali, right? This is actually a riff on the cover there. The official this is when Superman, this kind of riff on the Action Comics, the first appearance of Superman. And I'm not a big DC guy, but it is what it is. Anyway, the idea that this is pre-war Europe, but it's getting close. This is where people got to pick sides. Neville Chamberlain and them, we're going to appease Hitler. Joe Kennedy and John Fitzgerald Kennedy. I'm sorry, Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr.'s granddaddy, Joe, got his daddy as a little boy, and the rest of them over in London. He's over there representing the United States government. He comes back, but he's kind of, he got some nativist leanings, but America first, this kind of thing, it's a moment of uncertainty. Superman appeared. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, Jewish kids, friends since teenagers. They are in their 20s when they create Superman. What does he represent? This white godlike figure, this projection also of U.S. supremacy. Those of you who are into the comics, you're racing them, all know all this. If you've read the run called Red Sun is DC did a run where the question was, what if that little spaceship from Krypton had landed in Russia and not the Midwest of the United States? And I think, if I have it correct, somebody will correct me in the Mbangi, that the idea that it was from Kansas, that it landed in Kansas, wasn't introduced in the comics before Christopher Reeve played Superman in 1978. That's when Kansas became the place, which I think is interesting because you could take that back from 1978 to 1939, 40 years before, only 39 years before. And of course, we know that was where the House of the Wicked Witch landed, in Kansas, on the farm where Dorothy's parents were. Dorothy's family, the Wizard of Oz. Anyway, another Superman figure who was stripped by Toto, an earlier dog. Not Crypto, but Toto. Maybe there's something about the O's. But anyway, the point is this. It's certainly something about the dogs who got more sense than the humans, because dogs don't need a god in that sense. But the point is this. The idea then that this need for savior intensifies during national decline or national crisis or global crisis in the case of World War II, I think is very salient, because this is the same period you see Captain America emerge. Right? Steve Rogers emerges. The superheroes began to emerge in this moment, this pre and then during and then after World War II. And then, of course, after World War II, now that there's an atomic bomb, now you start to grapple with the impermanence of life as is introduced by the possibility of complete species destruction and global destruction through nuclear weapons. We're coming up on the 8th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, with the uranium mined in Africa, in Congo, that was put into those bombs that were dropped on the Japanese. And you think about the idea that these unleashed energies can engender an escalation in human the possibility of human extinction. You have everybody from arms dealers like Tony Stark, Iron Man, to victims, scientists who go a little too far. Maybe that would be Doc Bruce Banner, belted by gamma rays, right? The Hulk. The whole idea, these are all grappling with these questions of impermanence and the question of human fallibility, and commingling now with the science. And then you come into the 60s and Marvel just unleashes all the ennui, all the uncertainty, the teenage angst of Spider-Man, the possibility of false gods reintroduced. And now you got to deal with this question of mortality as representing somebody like the mighty Thor. Captain America, who understood right and wrong when he went into the ice, and now they find him in the ice, and now he's in a world that doesn't make the sense all the other way. Now it's like, what the hell? Wait, what? Civil rights? And then, wait, this used to be us versus the Nazis. What the? In fact, those early Superman and Captain Americas, they punching Hitler. Now he comes out the ice in the 60s like, this is a whole new world. Yeah, it ain't Disney, my friend. Oh, what the hell is going on here? And before the end of the decade, he got black friends like the Falcon. He goes to Wakanda and Spider-Man. Then you got the Fantastic Four who get hit by some of that same radiation. They shooting rockets in the sky and coming back down, realizing there's a whole cosmos out there. You got a huge white dude who coming to eat your world like Galactus. And now you down here, your friends, and you done stretched into a rubber band. Your wife got invisible force fields and she can be invisible. Your brother-in-law, her brother, can turn into fire. And your best friend is a big ass rock monster. All these belted by these cosmic rays, you know what I'm saying? All this NOE, but at the core of that is your family. You're still family. Those values, those American values, those ultimately white American values. Hell, they even tried to make Johnny Storm into a black guy. Remember Michael B. Jordan in the failed, I suppose, version of Fantastic Four? No, you can't keep injecting these black people into these narratives as anything other than sidekicks or morality plays, with the possible exception of Black Panther, who, by the way, the first time he appears in the Marvel comics, he is spying on the Fantastic Four. If you look at the issue of the Fantastic Four where the Black Panther first arrives, he's from Wakanda. He has infiltrated the superhero world of the Americans to see what the hell they're doing, because he got to go back. And Stan Lee and Jack Kirby always playing with these things because they're on the periphery. Again, I think there's something to be said, and I'm not saying this for the first time. There's a bookshelf of scholarship on the idea that many of these writers are Jewish. They're white, but their whiteness is of a different kind. And their momentum of memory is drawn from cultural meaning making and ways of knowing that extend far past the state we call United States of America. And what they're drawing from allows them a certain form of distance and perspective, is probably a better word, to begin to interrogate things that other people might not interrogate. So this shift to white godlike figures, projections of American supremacy, even critical projections of American supremacy. In the comics, you see it in the comics. Superman becomes who you need him to be. There's an elasticity there, you know. And so that recent James Gunn movie, the one that I saw last Sunday morning, I enjoyed it. But for me, I'm not, you know, I can find something in just about everything. So this white nationalism's mythic savior complex. And again, if we're talking about let me level set.
Before you go on, what about Mr. Terrific?
Well, that's where I'm coming. Yeah. In fact, let's deal with him right now, very quickly. You see the brother who plays Mr. Terrific. What's it? Eddie, what's his last name? Have you ever talked with him?
He's got a lot of names.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm embarrassed to say, I will stop and look it up. Eddie is probably
Gatigi. Is that how you say that?
Okay.
G-A-G-I, Gatigi.
It sounds like and I haven't looked at his background. It sounds East African. He looks almost Somali.
His dad is a Harvard trained lawyer. They're from Kenya.
Where is he from? Kenya.
Okay.
He's Kenyan. That's East African. Yeah, he's definitely East African. So now I don't know whether he's Gikuyu or Luyo and Eddie is maybe short for something. If it was Yoruba, I know it was short for something, but I don't know what it's short for. Because, you know, I hope it's not one of those situations where he said, y'all can pronounce Eddie. So I'm going to say, just say Eddie. My name, Eddie. Really? Is that what they call you at home? I always ask that. But yes, I was in the comic book store Wednesday, because you know Wednesday's comic book day. And I like to ear hustle, but the best way to ear hustle is to put in your earphones and don't turn them on. So I'm just getting my books off the shelf, listening to the conversation. And you know, there's this whole run now that has come out over the last year called Absolute. It's an Absolute brand in DC. So they got Absolute. Let me see. And here we go. Here's my bag. I haven't even unpacked my bag from Wednesday. This is my bag. I haven't gone through it yet. So let me see if I have. A couple of the Absolutes came out this week. It's like the Ultimate series in a little different way. Ultimates is the Marvel. In fact, this is the new Marvel Knights. Joe Quesada, who tried to get a book going in the Daredevil title called Santorians, maybe about almost 20 years. This is the Marvel Knights, the world, according to me, which you see the Black Panther there. Look at the comedic. She's pregnant, by the way. Yeah, it's got a lot going on in the Marvel universe right now. But that's not what I wanted to show you all. Let me see. New Avengers. No. Yeah, here's Absolute Flash. So the Absolute is like more gritty, real world. Like this is the Flash, but it's Absolute Flash, right? And here we go. It begins. They cross Brandon. There he is. And of course, there's Mr. Terrific There's Brother Eddie right there. Mr. Terrific is a long-standing character in the DC unit. Here's Absolute Batman. See a Bane character there. They got Absolute Superman, Absolute Wonder Woman. These two came out. I'll show you one more, and then I'll put these up. Well, two more. The Ultimate series, like this is Ultimate X-Men. They got an Ultimate X-Men. This is the Ultimates is probably closer to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And here's the latest issue edition of Ultimate Black Panther. It's Ultimate Black Panther. This is number 18 of Ultimate Black Panther. So they get to tell different storylines. Here's T'Challa taking an L. He always taking an L. Anyway, Superman takes an L at the beginning of this movie. Of course, he recovers, but that's not a spoiler alert. You've seen that in the commercials. But Mr. Terrific is driving a lot of these comic book fanboys crazy. Because it's interesting, Marvel and DC, they weren't complete matches, but they often tried to match each other as they were competing. So you need a techno guy. They got a lot of techno guys in the DC universe, but who's our Tony Stark? This kind of thing. So you see Mr. Terrific, this technological whiz who's smarter than everybody, and he's black in the new Superman movie. Well, that creates problems. And I must admit, I confess, in the middle of the night, I can't sleep, or I'll get on and watch some of the criticisms of Superman, and they mad at Mr. Terrific. And some of them are just openly racist. But most time they'll couch it in something not believable. It's a comic book. You know what's not believable? A human being who gets strength from the sun, who's indestructible and can fly. So y'all mad at the so they say it's not believable. It cracks me up. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm loving it. And which is part of James Gunn, the director and now the creative, who's reimagining the DC universe, because the good brother The Rock tried with Black Adam, and Black Adam has had many runs. They tried to launch that, didn't work. Again, they like their aliens white, Krypton, not Kandahar, my friend. But at any rate, shouldn't say that, but I said it. The point is that, which is why what Ryan Coogler did with the Submariner in Wakanda Forever is very interesting. He made that Namor again, like he did Killmonger a little ways with White B. Jordan in the first film, makes them someone who you can see post whiteness. And we talked about that in class. I won't go there again today. But the anger, I'm loving it, because James Gunn, I think, is as much about irreverence as he is anything else. Mr. Terrific is a mainstay in the DC comic world. So to bring him into the movie world as this black dude, you got Blue Marvel in Marvel, who's a black scientist, super scientist. Before that, you had Dr. Bill Foster, who was friends with Giant Man. He was known as Goliath. You had black characters, and of course you have the ultimate black techie, the ultimate African techie, T'Challa, who again with Reed Richards, they would consider Reed Richards to be the smartest man in the world until he get around T'Challa, and then they start talking in a language only two of them understand. And in moments, Reed Richards is like, yeah, T'Challa got that. In fact, if you all want to save yourself some time, go read Secret Wars, the Secret Wars series, where Dr. Doom takes over what's left of the multiverse, and T'Challa with Reed Richards and them challenge him. And I won't give away anything, but just know that we don't take L's. T'Challa don't take no L's. At the end, I'm just letting you know that's one of the genius elements of Wakanda. It's almost like when Jack Kirby and Stan Lee and them created the Black Panther, and then for a moment after he had been created, we talked about all this as well. So named him the Cold Tiger for a brief moment, and then he reverted back to Black Panther. Understand that the Cold Tiger was one of the nicknames attributed to Patrice Lumumba. And in the real world, you got uranium, like what you stuffed in bombs and dropped on the Japanese and threatened to extinguish the whole world with. In the comic world, they don't have uranium like that. What they have is vibranium. And so one of the premises of Wakanda is, what if there were a country in Africa that was never invaded and continued? And what you have is T'Challa, in some ways, is a gesture toward the idea of a Patrice Lumumba figure in control of the most valuable metal in the world, and ain't gonna give it up to nobody. And if you come here looking for it, we'll cut your whole head off and show it to you, like Ramunda, his mama, did in Wakanda Forever, when Angela Bassett threw them French spies in front of the UN and said, don't send nobody else over here. That's the thing that pisses white folk off. So Mr. Terrific, not on that scale, he ain't backed by a whole nation, but this individual with this technological prowess that even Superman must rely on at key moments to preserve himself and the world. Yeah, that sticks in the craw. of a white nationalist looking for this figure. But, again, James Gunn still isn't going to abandon the idea of this savior complex. His Superman's still going to save everybody because it's benevolent whiteness. And so you will be deranged, to borrow from what Mike said again, if you believe that at some point they're going to give up that centrality. And just like Superman must always be right until he's not, Trump must always be right until he's not. And that cultic faith is immune to fact. Which is why if you go see, I'm not telling y'all to go see James Gunn Superman. If y'all got a bootleg, if y'all want to wait till it's on something you already subscribed to, I'm thoroughly comfortable with that. I ain't tripping. Or if you don't ever want to see it at all, I'm not giving no spoiler alerts for those who you want to see. But I will say that there is a moment of crisis near the beginning of the film that is certainly replicated in some of the runs of Superman, if you read the comics, but I've never seen on screen as it relates to Superman. That will make you reminiscent of the very white nationalist cultic approach that we're seeing in U.S. politics right now with Russell Vogt and Kevin Roberts and all them people. That having been said, like I said, the rejection of Ta-Nehisi Coates' script for a Black Superman. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal last week. Was it last week? It was the 10th of July that it appeared. So it's a little over a week ago. Gestures toward the fact, quotes the fact that the Time Warner Discovery CEO, David Zaslav, rejected the Coates script, as the writer of the article says, as being too woke. I don't know that's what he said or not. I imagine he might have said it. He probably said a whole lot worse. But the point is that Ta-Nehisi Coates did a script on Black Superman and it ain't going to show up nowhere. But now those of you who are film buffs, if you go through what they call in the social structure, the so-called Black exploitation era of the 1970s, you know that there was a movie called Black Superman. But at any rate, story for another day. The myth must remain white to sustain the illusion of supremacy, even when the whiteness is benevolent. The Christ figure from Krypton. That's challenged by Black theology. The Black theology of Jeremiah Wright and James Cone, the Black theology of Vashti McKenzie and Katie Cannon, the Black theology challenges that. And worse still is the Black theology of somebody like Howard Thurman, who would take you even out of an anthropomorphic God into a more cosmic experience. And worse than that, now let's travel all the way back home, is a completely non-anthropomorphic way of knowing. Because they got to look at something with fingers and hands and eyes that made everything in reality. No, in fact, I was rereading. Do I have it here? Nah, that bag is over there and I'm not going to go get it. Rereading the play Inherit the Wind, because we just passed the anniversary of the Scopes monkey trial. Remember William Jennings Bryan versus Clarence Darrow in Tennessee, because the science teacher was teaching evolution, and the hillbillies came in and said, no, God made the world in 6 days, and 6 literal days, and you don't believe that, you can't be teaching this stuff in our schools, even as we see Bozo being the convenient delivery system for these theocrats who want to inject your child's mind with one thing and one thing only. Anything else is not for them. And of course, Inherit the Wind, if you are a certain age, I'm 60, so I remember when they put us on buses in Nashville, Tennessee, and took us down to the Nashville Children's Theater to see Inherit the Wind. And the battle where Clarence Darrow puts William Jennings Bryan on the stand, and has him deconstruct himself in terms of that theology. That's a challenge. But what would be even more challenging is the non-anthropomorphic ways of knowing, the non-human based ways of knowing. We don't need fingers and hands. So it's convenient to speak of Shango and Yemaya or Oshun or Olodumare, or to speak of them in gendered terms sometimes, but at least to be very clear about that. God ain't got no gender. And these people and these figures you were referring to as people aren't people. At some point, they may have been people. Wasir or Osiris, Nebet or Setek, Nephthys or Set. Set or Isis. They could have been human back in the day, thousands of years ago, but at some point, what they did in real life, if they were human, has been elevated to the concept of a principle, which is what Ayikwe Arma is always saying in his books, including The Way of Companions, Whiteness Shimsu. And so now you refer to them, you gesture toward them in ways that make them relatable to you, but ultimately they transcend human beingness. So that idea of having to need a person. And in some ways, we inject Jesus Christ in Africana ways of knowing with that same type of transcendence. The physical form is a point of entry, but ultimately it's cosmic forces we're dealing with. But those superheroes take the cosmic and reduce them to the physical and make them palpable to you. And I think that that's no different in the Gunn film. Gunn is trying to make Superman into a relatable figure, a more human figure. He's an alien, and alienness plays a critical role in this film. He is, after all, an immigrant. He has no passport. You can't ask him for his papers. He came from somewhere else. So that leads us to this question of scapegoating and xenophobia. Immigrants as villains in a hero narrative. Superman's the ultimate immigrant. You cast blame on him if he don't do what you want him to do as an undocumented refugee, an outsider. You see? And in key moments, you've seen this in the commercials where you got these non-white people engaged in this foreign country in a battle, and somebody's coming to get slaughtered, and this child is pushing forward this stick with a flag with an S on it, praying for Superman to come, literally praying, to follow with that Christocentric view, praying for Superman to come. The idea is, but these people need the intervention of whiteness. So even our conversation, even as I was reading in Financial Times yesterday, that Africa may benefit more in the long run from the United States withdrawing aid, even as China rushes in to fill the gap, thereby continuing to diminish the U.S. footprint in the world. And it's here now. It's accelerating. It was always coming, but now it's accelerated. But this idea that people around the world need Superman, need whiteness, need white intervention, it is a metaphor that is consistent. U.S. empire, but that empire is on shaky foundations now. Now there is a systemic deflection. This Epstein silence domestically is part of a national cognitive dissonance. These white nationalists have captured the flag. They've caught the Carr, and they want to impose on the rest of us their narrow theocracy. And they've got a brain-addled skin suit. If you don't think he's a skin suit, just look at his hands. We didn't need no briefing from Propaganda Barbie to try to convince us anything different. We have eyes. We can see what's going on with this 78-year-old man. But they've got a convenient delivery system and one in waiting who is actually a true believer. University Vance, to advance this narrow agenda. But guess what? They're getting pushback now. They're getting pushback. The inability to process truths that threaten the myth of white or U.S. moral purity. That cognitive dissonance is now breaking through in the hardest of their hardcore believers. But those who understand very cynically that they're using this as a delivery system, whether it be Peter Thiel or Elon Musk and them who have propped up Junior Varsity Vance, or those who are actually true believers like Russell Vogt and Kevin Roberts, their coalition is fragile primarily because the vast majority of us are not part of either one of those camps. The billionaires who want to crush us and the true believers who want to crush us and make us subsume to them like they're crusaders. Shout out to Pete Hegseth, the warrior crusader. Most of us not like that. And as I was saying last week, and have been saying consistently now for many years in this space, as we continue now past the half-decade mark, well past it here in our weekly conversations, this is not a nation. It's a country with many different nations in it, and its mythology is what binds it together. The red, white, and blue of the flag, or the red, yellow, and blue of the white man, Superman. And that myth making, that cultural meaning making of that moment is trying to force a false set of ways of knowing onto a population that doesn't have one set of ways of knowing. And in overheating and superheating and continuing to press what they think is their advantage now, they have moved past the idea that we are one people. And they are trying hastily to lock down what they see as their advantage for the foreseeable future, whether it be the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, calling a special session of the Texas legislature, even as they still haven't found all the bodies of the people, including some true believers. He called it a special session to force through gerrymandering, to try to get rid of Jasmine Crockett and Al Green, to try to redistrict. And guess what? The governor of California was in today's paper. Gavin Newsom is like, well, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to push the legislature to get rid of the bipartisan, nonpartisan gerrymandering commission we've set up. And we're just going to start filling Democratic seats in, putting Democratic districts together in California. This is the fracture, the cold civil war continuing to heat up. And because they think they've captured the flag and caught the car and they're going to press their advantage. In a moment when a man who shouldn't be a judge at a third grade kickball game, Emile Beauvais, is trying to get on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals so they can put him ultimately on the Supreme Court of the United States, the good brother, the great character brother who has thoroughly misinterpreted who he thinks these white supremacists are, at least out of his mouth, and that would be our good brother Cory Booker, is sitting there saying, you're better than that. I know you're a good man, Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley ain't trying to hear you. And that's even if he could hear at that age, and with his diminished capacity. But Chuck Grassley is an open white nationalist, my friend. He'll run over you like a truck to get this man on the bench so they can secure, at least think they secured this theocracy. But it isn't going to go that far. Gil Scott Heron is reminding us, if we're going to win, we got to stick together, be together, stay together. And that happens the day you understand, Cory Booker, ain't no such thing as Superman. It ain't no founding fathers. George Washington's not your father, just not like mine. And that man is not your brother. He's your open political enemy, my friend. And your job now is not to try to plead for some common decency and rules. It ain't no rules. You're in a street fight, bruh. You need to go listen to Jasmine Crockett on this one. And our job, what we're going to do about it, make sure your registration is there. Make sure your voter registration is there. Sure, go to a protest if you'd like. Gather, that at least let you see who else is out there and y'all can organize after the protest and before the protest. But ultimately, at least politically, in terms of our vote, this is our chance to coalesce and move ahead. People say, you're just a shill for the voting. I'm saying, let me be very clear about this. Let me be crystal clear about this. I'm a shield for our common humanity, and I'm a shield for African people as an African tapping into the momentum of our memory to help us achieve the best possible outcome we can for our people and for everybody else. And that means breaking the political back of those who would be the open enemy of those objectives. It's time to stop playing with these people. So this counter memory, as we kind of wind to close today, requires our self-determination fueled by ancestral vision. There are historical alternatives in the momentum of our memory. Now we're in, for our Africana Studies framework, the movement and memory category. There are alternatives to the Superman myth. And I don't care whether that Superman was named Clark Kent or George Washington. I don't care whether he was named Tony Stark or James Madison. I don't care what his name was. In fact, I was interested to think about this. I was moving some stuff around and I saw this piece and I didn't send it to storage, and I'm glad I didn't. This is the publication that came from the Jimmy Carter's inauguration. You see that the new spirit, a new commitment, a new America, the inauguration of President Jimmy Carter, Vice President Walter Mondale. And there's a new book, new to me, on Hubert Humphrey and the 1948 presidential election convention, Democratic National Convention, where they nominated Harry Truman and Hubert Humphrey, then the mayor of Minneapolis. I'm going to have to ask Angie about this, Porter, because, you know, I've been to Minneapolis. In fact, I was there one time when we were on our way to Rochester to speak at the NAACP banquet because Angie's parents had asked me to come, her mom in particular, to come speak at. So I went out there and spoke in Rochester, but I flew to Minneapolis and I'd never been there. And I see how they center after we went to where Dred and Harriet Scott were incarcerated, I would call it, at Fort Snelling, and where they killed Little Crow and those indigenous people there, Lincoln signing the death warrant. But the Hubert Humphrey statues, man, they got Hubert Humphrey deified. But Humphrey in 48 is pushing this civil rights agenda. Imagine if Hubert Humphrey had won election as president of the United States. It might be a different country. It's an interesting book as I'm reading it, but I'm looking through this inauguration book where they got all the other presidents and they got the life story of Jimmy Carter, and then they go to the convention and you see this big color picture. If I can find it quickly, here's the convention. You know, there's Miss Lillian in there, Rosalind and them. But and then they got Martin Luther King Sr. up here, right, praying at the end. And people say, oh, yeah, it's propaganda and it's camp. Yeah, it is. It is. Oh, by the way, the junior protege of Humphrey, who was sent in 1964 to try to get everybody together, Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and them, to get them to kind of calm down, which of course he wasn't able to do because they were not trying to hear it. And they even sent Martin Luther King, and them sisters said the same thing to him, this is the junior protege of Hubert Humphrey. That's Walter Mondale, of course, who just recently made transition. In fact, Mondale was a partner at the firm that Angie Porter was working at. In fact, and she would see him at work. There's Mondale and Carter. It's not ancient history. My point is, as I was looking at this, I was thinking, there's a moment in American history, recent US history rather, where it could have been different. Not completely structurally different, or maybe structurally different, but not completely different. We've passed that moment now. The white nationalists have captured the car. They were better organized than us. And in engaging in governance memory, the recovery of our governance formation through the momentum of memory, we understand the vision forward. This is what Gil Scott Heron is saying at the end of Ain't No Such Thing as Superman. There are historical alternatives to this settler colony that we have practiced in order to continue to stay sane and to engage in formations. Listening, and if the Ree is here, sis, I was listening to you yesterday for a minute, and you were talking about education. And you had a sister on earlier who had been talking about how during apartheid, what I call apartheid, Jim Crow, Jane Crow, the blacks with money, with resources, were forced to go to school with the blacks who didn't have them. And that was one of the reasons why the segregated schools were better. I'm not sure I agree with that. There are other variables, and you weren't saying, that was true. You said you hadn't thought about it. And as I thought about it, as you were talking, I was going through my mind thinking about the segregated schools and the fact that everybody went there. And first of all, the resource gap was not nearly as great as it is now. So the black quote unquote elite didn't have that much money, if much at all, than the rest of the black folk. Secondly, while I absolutely do think that and know that segregation forestalled class stratification, everybody who could pay the money to be at the Delta convention here in DC last week, or the Alpha convention in Philly this week, they got more money, generally speaking, than most of our people do. They got the money and they got the resources to travel and do this kind of thing. And if some of my line brothers here, please forgive me, because I still have yet to go to a national conference. Even this one is right up the road, and I'll be in Philly once a week. So sorry about that. But my point is that there's something else that holds us together that isn't just material resources. And these alternatives in the social structure rendering, in other words, we would call them alternatives to the Superman myth and the United States settler colony stuff in the social structure, but in the governance formation, who we are to each other, this is the natural progression. Lamont and I got the chance to talk with Kimberly Bryant, good sister, on Friday, who runs something called the Black Innovation Lab out of Memphis. She went to school in Nashville. She was in school just around the same time I was in school at Tennessee State. She was across town, not even across town, a few blocks away in West Nashville at Vanderbilt University. And she was talking about this Black Innovation Lab, unleashing Black creativity and engagement in science and technology to use our Africana studies framework, and tying it to the momentum of memory, because she wants to set up her headquarters for this in Memphis, her native Memphis, her hometown of Memphis. Shout out to Tammy Sawyer and all the folks out of Memphis. Has something called the something called the Griggs Business College. I want y'all to look that up. Griggs Business College. The Griggs Business College, Griggs, was set up by a sister named Emma J. Griggs in the 1940s. I want to say 1944. Closing my eyes because I'm trying to remember the details. Emma J. Griggs was the wife, by then the mid-40s, the widow of Sutton Griggs. If you know Sutton Griggs, you may know him as a writer, as a minister. They lived in Nashville for a while, then they moved to Texas. Then he made transition. She moved back to Memphis, which is when she started her school. Sutton Griggs wrote a very important book. He wrote a lot. Books been written on Sutton Griggs, but the book that came to mind, which I mentioned to her on the air as we were talking, is a book called Imperium in Imperio, Imperium, Imperium, N-I-N, Imperio, Imperio, Imperium in Imperio, a nation in a nation, a place within a place, 19th century, Sutton Griggs. Sutton Griggs imagined an all-Black world, in an all-Black town. And Prof, as I was glancing through on the way to log in today, I saw you make a comment on the great Toni Morrison, who you, of course, have all her works, and you reminded the person, because I know we had mentioned Paradise on the air, because Toni Morrison in that novel evokes the idea of a Black world. What will be the contradictions? What will be the communal possibilities? What will be the full humanity as lived through Black? And the way that novel opens, they killed the white girl first. Morrison, no joke. And it made me think of a four-parent of Toni Morrison. And by the way, my sister Dana Williams, her new book is out, Toni at Random. Let me see, can I pull it quick? Because I'm actually going to be, if you're in the DC area, this coming Tuesday, I think it's at 7 o'clock over at Politics and Prose on Connecticut Avenue. Because I remember when she took her first steps, we had long conversations about this, what became this, the outline for what became this book. It's called Toni at Random, the iconic writer's legendary editorship. Dana A. Williams, who was my colleague, she was chair of the English department when I was chair of American Studies. She's now the dean of the graduate school. There she is, Dana. This book just came out. But Toni Morrison is a beast when it comes to really engaging in discussions and in considerations of governance formations. And two of her literary foreparents, well, one of her literary foreparents, let's say two of her foreparents intellectually would be Emma J. Griggs and her husband Sutton Griggs. But in terms of the writerly dimension of her work, the cultural meaning making, the pulling out of Africana ways of knowing and things like Paradise, you're going to see Sutton Griggs get his novel, Imperium in Imperio. After he made transition in Texas, she moved back to Memphis and started something called the Griggs, in his honor and memory, the Griggs Business College. Many people may be hearing about Griggs Business College for the first time. That's an HBCU. It closed in the 70s. The building is still there. And what they are doing now, Kim Bryant is doing, along with some other sisters. There are several other sisters who, one sister acquired the property. Y'all can look it up. You can read the whole story of Griggs Business College. And if I know Karen Hunter, y'all, and I suspect that I know her certainly pretty well, certainly well enough to say what I'm about to say, you're going to be hearing from the sisters that got that property very soon on her show. These are Black women who have reclaimed the physical space because they're going to try to knock it down and put I think it was a gas station there. And one sister was like, oh, hell no, you not. It's now in the historical register. She started the school in her home in like 1916 when they first moved to Memphis. Then they moved around decades later. She comes back, gets the physical building, and they had graduates. They trained people in business and the humanities. It was an HBCU, and the building's still there. And these sisters getting ready to go in there and flip it and do and continue that work. You know, nobody coming for us. And guess what? We don't want nobody to come for us. We coming for ourselves. Ain't no such thing as Superman. The power of belief without myth. It's very important. The power of building comes from within us. And we can project that into symbolic figures. That's no problem. Well, the problem comes in when you get involved in make-believe. You have to have, as Sheikh Anta Diop said, the serenity to accept the facts as they are. That's what Ketanji Onyeka Brown Jackson is doing right now. Literal and aspirational interpretations of the 14th Amendment. I have an aspiration for what I would like to see in the society, but I'm going to round it and ground it into the clear-eyed, literal interpretation of what is going on. Cory Booker is having a crisis of faith. He has a need to believe in self and in community. And I get it, brother. But these people here, you got to talk to them a little different, my friend. You got to threaten them and make that threat real. Spiritual process is deeply important for African people in our ways of knowing, but it must take precedent over spectacle. We got to reclaim our ritual, reclaim our ways of knowing, reclaim that momentum of our collective memory, move beyond institutional approval toward an ancestral grounding. And we rewrite that. The day will come very quickly when we understand not only is there no such thing as Superman, but that metaphor for the, in terms of cultural meaning making, the figures that represent that will be for us projecting outward, not looking outward to have something poured into us. There is no man of steel. Faith, in many ways, is too passive. This is what liberation theology is about. Y'all ask Reverend Wright. Superman, whether it be in this new movie or in all the movies he's made, they've been made about him. He chooses. This is what makes James Gunn's movie interesting. Superman can make a choice. Do I save these people I'm not a part of, but I feel like I'm a part of because I got raised by some old white people in the Midwest instead of Soviet Russia? Or what if the rocket ship had landed in Uganda? All right. But the point is this. All right, Ta-Nehisi, I ain't seen the script, brother. I don't know if that's where you were going with it, but you know. The point is that Superman chooses whether or not to do it. Right? This is at the heart of the fear of the nativists when it comes to superheroes. This was the middle of the crisis. Remember Captain America Civil War, the movie that's based on a run in the comics where these white boys is terrified of these superheroes and they're going to try to regulate them. In fact, that's where you saw the whole so-called, what is this, Zirconia Accords and all that. Anyway, point is this. Superman chooses to save. What happens if he chooses different and says, I'm just going to rule over all these beings because I can kill all of y'all, so I'm going to make y'all my slaves, or I'm at least going to tell y'all I know best, I know better. That's that Project 2025 mess. That's that Kevin Robertson and mess. That's why they don't want their Superman mess with. And if you read comics, you can look at the video game that they turned into a comic run called the Injustice series. The whole premise there is that what if Superman decided, I'm just going to rule all of y'all? And at that point, there's a war between the superheroes. And while on the Marvel side, it's Captain America versus Iron Man on the question of whether superheroes should be regulated. That's the premise of Civil War. On the DC side, the Injustice side, as they absorb it into the comics, it becomes Superman versus Batman, who always has a plan. You understand? Batman is like their dark possibilities of no rules, right? And so Gunn grapples with that. And I think he grapples with that with a sense of humor that makes it deeply unsettling for them. And so I'm going to end with this. Here we are, week after week. Here we are with Knarrative and Nubia. Here we are all over these platforms, and people are grappling, looking for answers, looking for platforms. Mass commercial news, entertainment media is in a moment of crisis. The comedians are a little too raw with it. I don't care whether it's Stephen Colbert, whether it's Jimmy Fallon, whether it's Jimmy Kimmel, who actually had fire for their asses, if you saw what he said about Stephen Colbert, whether it's Seth Meyers, who kikied a little bit too much for me, but kikiing is his brand, or whether it's in a Superman movie having the Daily Planet. Here's a handful of old dinosaurs like me who read the physical paper every day, but the role of the Daily Planet in DC is almost like the role of the paper that J. Jonah Jameson runs in the imaginary city that Spider-Man swings through in Marvel. And if you saw No Way Home and some of that, you know, J. Jonah Jameson is now on the air. He's like Alex Jones. He got an InfoWars set. He's talking, he's like the rest of these influencers out here. But in the DC set, they make Perry White, the editor of the Daily Planet, black in this new Superman movie. That's the good brother Wendell Pierce, our brother, who is a straight shooter straight down the line. It's very interesting. That attempt to modernize commercial news entertainment media is very interesting to me, because we're at a moment in social structure where CBS and ABC and now, you know, maybe Paramount, they bending the knee. The Wall Street Journal not going to bend the knee, and we're not going to bend the knee. Why? Because we're very clear that your moment has passed as the fulcrum through which we read and experience everything. And the idea of a Daily Planet now narrating Superman and being the exclusive venue. No, if Superman were around today in a kind of fictional rendering, he'd probably have his own podcast. He might be sitting on the couch with Gilbert Arenas. Who knows? The point is that at this moment, I saw Gilbert Arenas now apparently saying he's trying to get Joy Taylor on there. Everybody trying to get somebody. They're already offering now for Stephen Colbert to join Midas Touch, I think is the platform they want him to come to. But what I'm coming to, and this is where I'll close, the unpoliceable dimension of our possibilities once we free ourselves from the illusion that there's a Superman, or in this case, in the material world, in the real world, that there is a state formation, a social structure that can somehow contain us and rule over us. Trump don't rule over us. We must live beyond the myth. We have to have the emergence of our, if we're going to use the metaphor, superwomen and supermen. Superwomen like Nina Gilbert, supermen like John Clark. The saving grace is the unpoliceable, the creativity, the spirituality, the refusal to conform, tapping into the momentum of our memory. The next iteration of ourselves, fueled by the momentum of memory, must not ask for permission to exist and must not project a pretend idea that these people are anybody other than who they are. They can be redeemed, but they're going to have to make that choice. It is not our choice. We cannot save them. Ain't no such thing as Superman. Kerry James Marshall said this in the conversation with Bill Rhoden. Bill Rhoden was like, in my line of work, I comment on the blood sports, basketball, football, people who are out there fighting to win for money. What does winning look like in the art world? Kerry James Marshall, like, winning for me looks like projecting myself into the world. My art isn't about me. My art is about ideas and about the possibilities of the people I come out of. We got to move from spectacle to process. Instead of seeking market validation, art and culture should seek the approval and the resonant chords struck by our people. We must return to work that in the social structure would be considered risky. To go to that work in terms of our ways of knowing that must be centered as sacred and accessible to the community. Let go of Superman. We don't need him. We never did. Black futures will not be saved by myths, but made by memory, struggle, and self-determination.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Amen. And amen. And Amen Ra.
Amen Ra. All of us. Yes. Yes.
Oh man, I am so grateful for this space. I can't even tell you I'm beyond grateful because I do know that this is, you say you're excited about these times, but for the pain. But this is forcing us to no longer sit in the illusion. So what are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? And we have everything we need to do something about it.
Period.
I almost feel sorry for those if it weren't for some pain. I mean, I know, and we've talked about this week. Our hearts go, our complete souls go to the family of Breonna Taylor, to all those people who were, Brett Hankerson. Y'all, we ain't got to let nothing go. We won't let anything go politically, but understand that Dr. King said the arc of the universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We help bend that arc. Please understand that. Dan Cameron sold his soul to these white people. And for a season, Mitch McConnell stroked his head like a puppy. And now he can't raise no money as he's trying to run for Senate. He's been used and he's out there in that same junkyard they throw in Tim Scott and that boy from Florida, Byron Donalds. You in the swamp, bro. Dan Cameron can't win. And what did you get it for? And meanwhile, they're going to let this man walk. And if they give him a year, if the judge give him any time at all, you better believe Donald Trump going to pardon him if he makes it that long. But guess what? Don't get distracted. Nobody went in the street. Nobody prayed. Nobody helped people when they were sick with COVID. Nobody fed folks like, Tamika talks about all the time. Nobody did that with getting them guys to go to jail being the objective. We did that because we take care of our own.
That's right.
And don't get distracted. Don't
We've
get distracted.
Socialists.
How about that? Yeah, exactly. You're going to put a name on it, no question.
Oh, man.
I love you.
I love you too.
I love you. I know it's been love. Hey, listen, y'all, Monday night we'll be in office hours as long as lightning don't strike the transformer around here. Y'all pray. And
let me just say that was beautiful. And your shows this week with the Lieutenant General and I even pulled clips. That Urban View Mornings is chef's kiss. And
you put us in there. Thank you.
Nubia and Refill. That was so beautiful as well. We'll be doing more of that. And Urias just did that on the fly. I said, man, the production of that thing.
Amazing.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. All the whole. But we are calling people to be amazing. That's the standard. That's the bar. And I was just in the chat, people talking about Cory Booker, whatever. He's a tool. Maybe literally. Yeah. But we put too much on. We put too much on these politicians. They're politicians. Yes, they're going to take money. They're looking for the direction. It's our responsibility to let them know this is what you're going to do, or else. And then must be or else. We can't idly threat. Everybody should feel uncomfortable about their position. They should all feel they can be voted out. And we don't do a good enough job of that. They are tools. They are not our friends. They are not. We're not to fan out over them. We shouldn't put them on pedestals. They are there to get us resources and rights. And if they're not doing it, on to the next. This ain't even personal. And we need to, name calling him. We're not going to press him into service. He's not. It's all performance. Nope.
That's it.
So
that's it.
Let us perform. Show up in November, and the impeachment won't mean anything if we don't get a conviction. So that means the Senate has to flip. So study the map and make sure your state stays Georgia. We need both those seats. Don't play around. Let's do what we're supposed to do. No excuses. No excuses.
It's no excuses. They're nervous. Not that this is the barometer. But if you watch, Steve Bannon's losing his mind. He knows that they can't afford to lose 10%. He said, if we lose 10%, that's 40 seats in the House, and we lose the presidency 2 years later. He's very clear. This is the moment, Prof, and we about to close out. It just reminds me, though, in terms of the history, in terms of the social structure, we have been here before. This is what Ida Wells, we just passed her birthday this week. At those moments when it looks like it's the most hopeless, consistently, this is when they overplay their hands and fight. And that's when we advance. We've seen it every time. That's another reason I'm enthusiastic. It's not delusion. I'm clear about what happens next if we show up. Please, y'all, listen to what Professor Hunter is saying. If we show up, we know the outcome. We've done it before.
Last thing on Ida B. Wells, to this week on my show, because she inspires me over my shoulder right there.
And she's the reason we're sitting here. Ida B. Wells was the first conversation.
But what I'm most inspired by that the times falter into there's an echo. Into action.
Not anymore. I'm getting
just mute. The times called her into action, and everybody right now who's running their mouth about a thing, history will remember, what did you do? You can have all of the opinions you want to have. What did you do? You can be here casting stones and aspersions, but what did you do? These times are going to require something of you, and we see you now. You can't hide. You're going to be hide behind no book deals and no platforms. You either stand up now, because we're watching, or sit down and shut your mouth. But this will not be a time for a bunch of bloviation, okay? What did you do? Roll up your sleeves, get busy, or sit down somewhere. We don't need a lot of this friction, this back and forth. So Ida B. Wells is to me, the blueprint for what that looks like. Oh, you gonna lynch my friends? Okay. All right, I'm not going to stop talking about you. I'm not going to stop writing about you. I'm not going to stop holding you accountable. I'm not going to stop. So I feel that way, Dr. Carr. I feel that way. So thank you.
Thank you. Love you. Thank you. See y'all Monday night.
All right.
Mercy after it seems like all you get is pain. It seemed to me that you have found the courage that others could not find. You alone have the wisdom to take this world and to make it what it needs to be, want to be, will be. Someday you'll see the day you understand why there ain't no such thing as a Superman. There ain't no such thing as a Superman. There ain't